single file line to the closest school the government tells them that they can go to. That's crazy. That's insane. That's not efficient. It's not very effective. We need to be changing everything about public education, because everything about public education is contributing to high costs and low returns. And it's not the teacher's fault. It's not it is probably the superintendent's fault. But the real fault is, again, what we ask our schools to do. We ask our schools to pick Johnny up in the morning, to feed him breakfast, to feed him lunch, to feed him dinner, to bring him home, to entertain him during the day, to make sure he has nice hygiene, give him some entertainment on Friday evenings, something to do, on Tuesday and Thursdays in the spring. Go down the line. All the stuff we ask our schools to do. And that stuff is expensive. And it doesn't really contribute to education. But, we all think that it's fun and cool and all that kind of stuff. So we have to start changing our expectations if we're going to see any real substantive changes to our tax burden. So there's huge challenges out there, but I'm convinced as I look at the political landscape, see what's going on with Campaign for Liberty, see what's going on with the Tea Party, see what's going on frankly, over the past 6 months, there's not been a single Republican women's club that I've spoken to in which, at that meeting, I wasn't told, this is the most turnout we've ever had. That's not because I'm there, because they then hastened to add, and last month was the biggest meeting we'd had, and the month before that was the biggest meeting we'd ever had. People are hungry for solutions. People are hungry for candidates and for movements that can correct what we now all recognize is a badly off-kilter ship. Hopefully we can be there to provide them something. And I think the challenge that we have in our movement is that at some point, tea parties and meetups and coffee clatches and whatever else, those are fine and good. But the real question is going to be, who do we elect to office? Who do we kick out of office? What policies change as a result of all this stuff? Because if in 4, 6, 8, 12 years nothing's changed, what's been the point? And that's the measurement for me. It's not how many people are turning out to events. The measurement is, in 6 years, is there going to be some dude elected to Congress who just kind of in passing mentions that, I got involved in politics for the first time when I went to a tea party in Oasis County. Then we were successful. Then we won. That's when we know that all this energy we see building up has merit and has value. But if we're just doing it to feed our egos, if we're just doing it because, it's American Idol is not on, or whatever it may be, then I think there are probably other things that we can be doing. We would love to have you guys involved with us. We have a very low-cost membership. It's free. Sign up for our email list and you'll get our stuff. Pretty simple. We try to make sure that we give folks very practical things that they can do during election seasons. Here's someone you can call and harass. Here's someone that you can call and say nice things to. And frankly, we as conservatives and libertarians tend to be really bad at both those things. We tend to be pretty good, actually, I should correct myself. We tend to be pretty good at calling up and yelling and screaming at somebody. But then, when they do something right, very rarely do we bother to call. But we forget that most politicians, 99.99% of them, really don't have much in the way of core values and principles. Most of them are just people who want to be loved. And that's fine. Driving home tonight to Austin, I would like to think that between Corpus Christi and Austin, Texas, there's nothing on the road but members of a modern temperance movement who all believe that you should be stone cold sober 24/7. I'd like to believe that. But I know for a fact that that's not true. And so I'm content with getting home safely simply because everyone else on the road doesn't want to be arrested by the big burly guy from DPS. I'm fine with that outcome. The outcome is the same for me, getting home safely. That's my objective. And so in the same way, I've really come to not care, after a fashion, what politicians believe. I really couldn't care less. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to know how you vote. That's all I care about is the outcome. It's kind of like when I'm watching a movie. Do I care that Brad Pitt is a Marxist? Not really, because he's sitting there being eaten by a spider. That's kind of fun, whatever it may be. The same way with politicians. We just need them to vote right. Now, eventually, I want us to have politicians who vote right because they believe it's the right thing, and that's our goal. But in the meantime, we should make sure they're scared of us. But in the same way, we should make sure that they feel good about being loved by us. And so when we see our guys doing something right, or even their guys do something right, we should let them know. Because the nice, just like with your kids, if your kid feels like that, when they clean your room and you pat them on the head and, let them go play, oh, wow, I got to go play. Oh, if I clean my room tomorrow, maybe I get to go play then too, The same thing's true with politicians, that we need to give them both carrots and sticks. When they do something right, let's praise them, because that makes it more meaningful than when we criticize them. I'm somewhat jokingly referred to as the 80% guy, because at the end of the day, I am more than happy to give awards to legislators who score an 80% on my scorecard. Now, as a student in school, I usually didn't get in trouble when I came home with a B. When I came home with a B, it was cool. When I got an A, I got happy, happy, love, love. Even better. But I didn't get in trouble with the B. And so I kind of look at legislators the same way. I consider someone who's with me 80% of the time to be an ally, who I can then improve the other 20% of the time. And when it comes to elections, I'd rather get somebody elected who's with me 85% of the time than be stuck with someone who is against me 95% of the time. And so that's, I think, the other balance that we in our movement have to be looking at as we move towards a culture of liberty, as we move towards getting people excited, showing them how we can influence candidates, influence the process by being both hard noses, while at the same time being warm and fuzzy. I'm not good at the warm and fuzzy part, but I'm working on it. And then kind of in wrapping up, I just encourage you that that none of us can look at this as we're going to win tomorrow, or we're going to win next week, or next month, or next year. My ancestors, a guy named Benjamin Rush, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, and I'm always struck as I think about what Dr. Rush and his colleagues signed on August 2nd of 1776. That as they signed that document that had the cool poetry at the first, had the king's a jerk in the middle, which is my favorite part, but it's the ending that you and I should be living out today. Let's say, to this we pledge our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor. That, when Rush signed that on August 2nd of 1776, he didn't know if the revolution was going to last a week. He didn't know if he'd be bankrupt the next month. He didn't know if his entire family would be dead the next year. But it was worth it to him. He was willing to put everything on the line for as long as it took. They only knew their goal was liberty. They only knew their goal was freedom. And in the same way, we need to be committed to that long-term view. And very often in our movement, we think, if I don't win everything today, then I'm going home. Sometimes it takes a long time to win. Barry Goldwater lost in 1964. I've never actually believed that. I think Barry Goldwater won because we got Reagan in 1980. You can draw a direct line from Barry Goldwater's loss in 1964 to Ronald Reagan's victory in 1980. The two are inextricably linked because of the work Goldwater did in changing culture, changing the discussion, changing the dialogue. It took 16 years, but we won eventually. And the same way, I think that's where we need to be working today, is looking at victory over that 10, 15, 20-year timeline. And we will be successful. The history of the world shows that big government only lasts for a relatively short period, and then it collapses upon itself. We still have an opportunity to hedge off the collapse if we're willing to commit ourselves to the long haul. So with that, I'll stop babbling.
No, thank you.
You've got me. I'm all babbling now. I had caffeine over at Starbucks a minute ago.
Thank you very much.